Yeah, I'm Aidan. I'm the Group Agency Director at GoTransit Media Group, and I thought today I'd just share a little bit about my connection to First Nations people in Australia. So my story started when I was a little kid, actually. I grew up in a place called Geraldton, which is about 5 hours north of Perth. A lot of the population there is Indigenous, and it's made up of two tribes, the Noongars and the Yamatji people. So I was very immersed in the culture, I guess, from a young age. My dad actually worked for the government as a youth liaison officer with the Indigenous, so liaising from the government with the community to help get these at-risk kids back on track, because there was a unique cross-section of Indigenous culture where we lived. Obviously some were doing great and fully immersed in kind of their own culture and holding on to those beliefs, but also adjusting to the way of, you know, working and living in a booming mining and fishing town. Moving to the Sunshine Coast, it's quite a different landscape. In terms of the community and the culture being intertwined, it was a fair bit more diluted, which kind of noticed from the start. But when we moved over here, my mum reconnected with her biological father, and he had been living up in the Torres Strait for about 25 years in a place called St. Paul's. He's not First Nations people by any means, but he went across to work with the government as an electrician to set up the power grid. Through that, he had his own electrical business. He put a lot of Torres Strait and Aboriginal kids through apprenticeships. He endorsed them to go to Cairns and Townsville, Mount Isa to do further apprenticeships or go to trade college and schools. And he also adopted a couple of the local children up there and paid for their schooling and brought them into his family. With all that, he was made an honorary white elder as part of giving back to the community. And it wasn't until I was about 16 I made my first trip up there to see what it was all about and spend the New Year's Eve with Grandad and the locals. And it's like stepping off the plane or the boat into a different world. They live off the land, they're very big on tradition, and it made me realise the vast difference between coming from WA and the culture there of that certain tribe of Indigenous to then coming to the Sunshine Coast and then going up to the Torres Strait. And so that was like my first kind of proper experience of the Torres Strait, and then from there a couple more trips, and then my granddad got sick and passed away. And then that's when I guess my second dip into the culture really happened for me with the elder of the island he lived on. You know, he put us up in his home for a week. Like I mentioned earlier, they live off the land, which is very different to how we operate, like being from the sunny coast and even WA, going diving for crayfish or even having cray pots and doing stuff like that. You have to have licenses, you have to measure everything, you have to, for them it's very much a live off the land and let it regenerate. So I was lucky enough to get invited out onto one of the reefs to go spearing for crayfish. Saw a few shark, dugong, turtle. They were like showing me signs of the commercial fishing that had come in, like unpermitted and that already the damage that was doing to their untouched parts of the land. So, and when we were coming back to the boat ramp, they were actually having a ceremony for a turtle that one of the other boats had caught. So that night we have a big ceremony in honour of my granddad, like a wake. So like you're having all these local food and drinks, which is awesome. And then the day after, they have a ceremony for the turtle that they caught. They return the shell back to the reef, and that becomes like its own living habitat for other animals. So pretty blessed to be able to have that and share my experience. And I guess going through that growing up, which to me makes me understand like how important working towards a RAP plan is. And I'm excited and honoured to be a part of the committee as well, because we're a business that is scaled but still small enough to actually make an impact and make a change. And we've got key decision makers on board and behind this project. And you know, just with the markets that we represent with our assets, like we've got a strong connection to this country. We've got very large coverage in communities that do have large Indigenous populations still. So I'm excited to see what kind of changes we can work towards there with our RAP plans. More people need to kind of see this side of the Indigenous culture and our First Nations people, just to get that understanding and to want to actually be proactive in, like you said, that healing and that reconciliation. So.